Jack had been alone on the alien planet for nearly 2 years. His ship had crashed after a surprise meteor storm, leaving him stranded with no way to contact Earth. The planet was wild, filled with strange animals, glowing trees, and a sky that changed color every few hours. But Jack had learned how to survive, building a shelter from broken ship parts, hunting local animals, and collecting water from giant leaves. His days were hard, but quiet, until one night, everything changed. A strong storm hit the jungle, louder than any Jack had heard before. Winds howled like wolves, lightning flashed red and purple. Jack sat inside his small shelter, watching the storm, when he suddenly heard something different. It wasn't thunder, it wasn't the wind, it was a scream, high-pitched and full of fear. Not an animal, not a machine, it sounded human. He grabbed his flashlight and his homemade spear. Heart pounding, the scream came again. This time, closer. Without thinking, Jack ran out into the storm, following the sound through the dark jungle. Rain hit his face like needles. Mud pulled at his boots. Still, he ran, jumping over roots and pushing past glowing plants. Then, in a small clearing, he saw her. She was lying on the ground, covered in dirt and blood. Her skin was light blue, her hair silver, glowing softly even in the dark. Her arms were shaking. And behind her stood a creature, a monster with long arms, black skin, and 2 burning red eyes. The thing was ready to strike. Claws raised high, Jack didn't stop to think. He shouted and threw his spear, hitting the beast in the side. It let out a terrible roar and turned to face him. Jack grabbed a heavy branch and charged. Swinging hard, the monster slashed his arm. But he didn't stop. He hit it again and again until it fell back into the trees and disappeared into the storm. Breathing hard, Jack turned to the girl. She was still conscious, eyes wide with shock. Jack knelt beside her and tried to speak slowly. "It's okay. I'm here to help," he said. Not knowing if she understood, she didn't speak. But her hand reached out and touched his arm lightly, gently. He lifted her in his arms and carried her back through the jungle. Every step was a fight against the wind, the rain, and the fear that the creature might return back at the shelter. Jack cleaned her wounds using water and bandages he had saved. She winced but stayed quiet, watching him the whole time. Her eyes were deep violet, glowing softly. She didn't speak his language, but she understood kindness. Jack gave her food, and she ate slowly. She was weak, cold, and scared, but safe. That night, Jack stayed awake, his arm bleeding from the creature's claw. He looked at the alien girl sleeping in the corner of his shelter and wondered, who was she? Where did she come from? Why was that monster chasing her? And most of all, was it coming back? In the silence between the rain, Jack heard soft sounds, whispers, clicks, something moving outside. He held his weapon close and waited, breath shallow. Nothing came. But he knew this was only the beginning. Something strange was happening on this planet, and somehow he was now part of it. The next morning, the girl woke up and tried to speak. Her voice was soft, full of strange words he didn't understand. She pointed to the jungle, then to herself, then made a cross shape over her chest. Jack didn't understand, but he nodded. He said, "I'll help you," and pointed to himself, Jack. She looked at him, blinked and said, "Leary?" Jack smiled. So she had a name, Leary. He didn't know if he had saved her, or if she had saved him. But one thing was clear. His lonely days were over, and something much bigger was starting. He looked out at the jungle, his arms still hurting. Somewhere out there, danger was waiting. But he wasn't afraid anymore. Because he wasn't alone, Leary sat near the fire, her eyes watching the flames like she was trying to remember something. Jack worked quietly, cutting jungle fruit and checking the traps he had set earlier. His arms still hurt from the creature's attack. But he didn't let it show. He had someone to take care of now. Someone not from Earth, but still. Someone who needed him. Leary didn't talk much. She would say a word or two, but her language was strange, full of soft clicks and smooth sounds. Jack tried to teach her simple English words, pointing at things and saying their names. Fire, he said, tapping the flame. She repeated it. Fury, then smiled. Her smile was small but bright. Like moonlight through the trees, over the next few days, she learned fast. She pointed to herself and said, Leary. She pointed to him and said, Jack. She pointed to the trees and said, Jugal, he laughed. Jungle, he corrected. She nodded and said it again. Jungle. There was something innocent about her. And yet, something powerful hiding beneath the surface. But Leary wasn't just learning. At night, she would wake suddenly. Eyes wide, skin glowing faintly blue. She whispered strange words, looked around the shelter, and sometimes stared at Jack like she had seen him before. She would draw in the dirt symbols, stars, a circle with dots around it. Jack tried to understand, but none of it made sense. All he knew was that Leary had lost something or someone. One afternoon, Jack returned from hunting and found her gone. Panic hit him like a punch in the chest. He dropped everything and ran into the jungle, calling her name, Leary. Where are you? No answer. Just the sound of wind and distant animal calls. Then, soft footsteps behind a large glowing plant. He rushed over and found her kneeling in the mud, hands shaking, staring at a patch of crushed leaves and strange tracks. She looked up at him, her face pale, her lips trembling. She drew a shape in the mud, 3 claw marks, just like the creatures. Then she drew a group of figures, standing in a circle. One in the center crossed out, her hand hovered above the drawing, and she pointed at herself. Jack understood. Her people. They were taken, or worse, she was running from something. Not just a monster, but something bigger. Something organized, back at the shelter. Leary finally spoke clearly. Many, she said, holding up 5 fingers, then 10. Gone. Light. Fear. Jack listened carefully. She was trying to tell him her tribe was attacked, taken by dark creatures that came from the sky or the forest. She said one word again and again. Zeroin. Jack repeated it. Zeroin. Who is that? She shook her head and drew the red-eyed creature in the dirt. Then scratched it out. Zeruin was the enemy. Jack felt a cold chill. If that thing came back, they would need more than a stick and fire to survive. That night, while Leary slept, Jack worked on weapons, sharpened stones, reinforced spears, and a trap near the shelter. He didn't know what they were up against. But he wasn't going to wait. He had been a survivor. But now he had a reason to fight, not just for himself, but for her. In the morning, Leary surprised him. She had gone into the jungle alone again, but this time, she returned with food, strange purple fruit, and clean water from a high leaf. She smiled and handed it to Jack, then pointed at the trees. Safe, she said. For now, Jack nodded, but deep down, he knew safety wouldn't last that evening. As the sky turned gold and green, Leary sat by the fire and started drawing again. This time, it was a map, simple but clear. She pointed to one mark and said, home. She pointed to another and said, dark. Jack looked at the path between them. It was long and full of danger, but if her people were still alive, maybe he could help her find them. Then, something strange happened. A soft wind blew through the trees. and the fire flickered. Leary's skin glowed brighter, and she looked toward the jungle. Her eyes narrowed, and she whispered, "They watch." Jack stood, spear ready, but saw nothing. Still, he believed her. Someone or something was watching them. Not just animals, not the red-eyed beast, something else. And Jack knew that their time alone was running out. Leary wasn't just a lost girl. She was part of something much larger. And Jack, once just a stranded man, was now walking straight into a war he didn't understand. The jungle was quiet, too quiet. Jack moved slowly, spear in hand, eyes scanning every shadow. Leary walked beside him, her head low, her steps light as a feather, for days. They had been following the map she drew deep into the unknown. Jack had lived near the edge of the jungle for years. But this part was different. The trees were taller, their trunks black like burned stone, and the air felt heavy, like something was watching them with invisible eyes. Each night, they camped in silence. Jack would build a small fire, while Leary listened to the wind. Sometimes, she would stand still for hours, staring into the trees as if waiting for someone or something. She didn't smile anymore, not since they saw the tracks again. Red-eyed creatures had passed through here recently. And they weren't alone. One night, Jack couldn't sleep. He sat beside the fire, sharpening his spear. When he heard branches snapping, footsteps, whispers, he grabbed his weapon and looked around. "Leary," he whispered. She opened her eyes, already alert. She pointed to the trees, then raised 2 fingers. 2 figures. Watching them, Jack moved fast, circling around the campfire, hiding in the shadows. Then he saw them, 2 shapes moving between the trees, tall, fast, and silent. He jumped out, ready to attack. But the figures vanished, melting into the darkness like smoke. Leary stood behind him, her eyes glowing softly. She whispered one word, "Hunters," the next morning. They found marks carved into the tree symbols like claws, some fresh, some old. Leary said they meant danger, a warning left behind. Jack wanted to turn back, but Leary said no. "We're close," she said. "Home is near, by midday." The jungle opened up into a wide clearing. In the center stood a large stone circle, cracked and covered in vines. Leary froze, her hands shaking. "This was our gathering place," she said, her voice almost breaking, but the circle was empty now. No people, no signs of life, only broken bones and crushed metal. Jack walked into the center, feeling the air shift. There was something here in energy, a memory left behind. Leary knelt beside the stones and began to sing a low, sad sound in her native tongue. The ground beneath them began to glow faintly, lighting up old paths hidden in the dirt. Suddenly, a sound filled the air, whispers. Soft at first, then louder. Jack turned and saw them. Figures stepping out from the jungle 10. Maybe more. All women, their skin pale blue like Leary's, their eyes glowing in the fading light. They carried spears and strange tools, their movements fast and silent. They surrounded Jack and Leary without a word. One of them stepped forward, taller than the others, her face covered with glowing paint. She looked at Leary, then at Jack. She said something in their language, sharp and fast. Leary answered quickly, her voice rising. Jack didn't understand the words, but he understood the emotion: fear, anger, disbelief. The tall woman stepped close to Jack, staring into his eyes. He didn't move, just nodded once and lowered his weapon. She raised a hand, touched his chest, then said one word in broken English. "Why?" Jack looked at Leary, then at the woman. "I helped her," he said, slowly, clearly. "I saved her," the woman said something to the others. And they stepped back. Leary turned to Jack and whispered, "They are my sisters." Jack nodded, trying to process what he was seeing, a hidden tribe of alien women, surviving alone in the jungle, afraid of outsiders. The tall woman motioned for them to follow. They were led through hidden trails, past glowing stones and silent trees. Finally, they reached the tribe's village built high in the trees. Bridges made of vines, shelters glowing with soft light. It was beautiful, quiet, and full of life. But no men, not one. Jack climbed up slowly, feeling many eyes watching him. Children peeked from behind tree trunks. Older women whispered from above. He felt like a ghost walking through sacred ground. Leary spoke with her people, fast and emotional, pointing at Jack, showing her scar, telling the story. Some nodded, others frowned. Then the leader, the tall woman, raised her hand, and silence fell. She spoke in her language, then turned to Jack. "You stay," she said. Trial comes. That night, Jack sat alone in a wooden room lit by glowing stones. Leary came to him, quiet and thoughtful. "They do not trust men," she said. "They fear what they once knew." Jack didn't ask, but he understood. Something bad had happened here long ago. Something tied to the creatures, the Zaruin. And now he had walked into their hidden world. Outside, the jungle grew dark again. But this time, the shadows were not empty. Something moved beyond the trees. Something hungry, and it was coming closer. The wooden platform creaked beneath Jack's boots as he stood in the center of the village. Dozens of glowing eyes watched him from above and below. The tribe of alien women said nothing, only stared. They had never seen a human before, and they didn't seem happy he was here. Leary stood beside him, her face calm but her hands clenched. She had spoken for Jack, had told the truth. He had saved her life, protected her, walked through danger just to help. But for the tribe, that wasn't enough. They had rules made long ago, rules that said no outsider. Especially no man could be trusted. The tall woman who had led them here stepped forward. She was the leader. Her name was Vera, and her voice was sharp like a blade. She looked at Jack and then spoke to the tribe, her words fast and powerful. Jack couldn't understand the language, but he understood her tone. She didn't want him here. Leary stepped forward. Speaking in the same tongue, her voice was different, gentle, but strong. She pointed to the scar on her arm. To the marks left by the red-eyed creature, she pointed to Jack. Then to the broken necklace she had worn when she first arrived. It had belonged to her sister, lost in the attack. Jack had helped her survive that nightmare. That had to mean something for a long moment. Vera said nothing. Then she turned to Jack and said, "One night. One trial." Leary translated, "You stay one night, but tomorrow you must face the trial of truth." Jack didn't know what that meant, but he nodded. He wasn't afraid. That evening, Jack was given a small room built into the side of a giant tree. Inside, it was warm and glowing with soft light. He sat on the floor, staring at the wooden walls, trying to understand what was happening. These women had survived in the jungle for years, hiding from danger, hiding from the Zarawan, and now he had stepped into their world. Uninvited, Leary came to visit, her eyes full of worry. "They think men bring war," she said. "Long ago, human hunters came to this planet. They hurt many tribes. Then the Zaruin came, worse than the men." Jack listened in silence. It made sense now why they lived in the trees, why they feared outsiders, but he wasn't like those men, and he would prove it outside. The village was quiet. Children played in silence. Guards walked across the bridges with sharp weapons. Vera stood at the edge of the platform, watching the jungle. She didn't trust Jack, but deep down, she also feared something else, something worse. The jungle had grown restless lately. Animals had gone missing. Lights in the trees had started to fade. The elders whispered of the Zerawan returning. That night, Jack couldn't sleep. He kept thinking about the red-eyed beast, about the way it had spoken in Leary's dreams. He felt like he was being pulled into something much larger than himself. He had only wanted to survive. But now, he was part of a hidden war. Suddenly, the alarm sounded a sharp whistle followed by 3 beats on a drum. Jack jumped to his feet and ran outside. Tribe warriors rushed across the platforms, bows ready, lights flashing. Leary met him at the bridge, eyes wide with fear. "They're here," she whispered. "The shadows have come, in the distance." Jack saw them, creatures moving through the jungle. Fast and silent, their eyes glowed red, and their shapes twisted like smoke. There were more than before, maybe 10. Maybe more. They didn't attack. Not yet. They just stood at the edge of the trees, watching, waiting. Vera raised her spear and shouted a command. Guards took positions, aiming arrows. But the creatures didn't move. One stepped forward. Holding something in its claw-torn piece of cloth, Leary gasped. "That's from my sister's robe." Jack felt anger rise inside him. He stepped forward, but Vera held out her arm. Stopping him, "Not now," she said. "They test us. But they will return." Then she looked at him again. This time, not with hate, but with something else koshin. "You say you are not like other men," she said. "Then prove it. Tomorrow. You face the trial. If you fail, you leave that night." The tribe held a quiet meeting. Leary begged them to trust Jack. She told them he was not just strong, but kind. He didn't want to lead or control. He just wanted to help. Some listened, some didn't. But the decision was made. The trial would happen at sunrise. Back in his room, Jack sat in silence. He didn't know what the trial would be. A test of strength, of truth, of memory, maybe all 3. But he knew one thing. He couldn't walk away. Not now. Not after what he had seen. Not after what he had felt outside. The shadows were still watching, and in the sky above, something dark moved between the stars. The real war hadn't even begun. The sky turned deep orange as the first light of dawn touched the treetops. Jack stood alone in the center of the village circle, surrounded by tall women with serious eyes and sharp weapons. The trial of truth was about to begin. Leary watched from the edge of the platform, her hands shaking. She believed in him, but belief alone might not be enough. Vera stepped forward, holding a glowing crystal orb in her hand. "This trial," she said, "is not just for strength, it is for spirit." Jack didn't understand the words, but he understood her voice. He nodded once, showing he was ready. The crystal lit up, and a beam of light wrapped around Jack suddenly. Images flashed before his eyes, his crash, his first night alone, the battle with the creature. Leary's face when she first smiled, but then the images twisted visions of Earth's soldiers. Guns, fire, screaming aliens. They weren't his memories. They were the tribe's, their pain, their fear. Their past. Jack fell to his knees, overwhelmed. The crystal showed both his truth and their truth. Then it went dark. Silence fell. Vera looked at the tribe, her face unreadable. "He is not one of them," she said slowly. "He is not a hunter." Some women nodded. Others looked away, unsure, but the trial was complete. Jack had passed. For now, he could stay. Relief washed over him, and Leary ran to his side, smiling for the first time in days. But just as Jack stood to speak, a loud crack echoed through the jungle. A deep, rumbling growl followed. Shaking the trees, everyone froze. Then came the scream high. Sharp and full of terror, a scout stationed on the far platform was gone. Only a blood-stained rope remained, swinging in the wind. The Zarowin had returned, but this time, they weren't testing, they were hunting. Vera barked orders, and the tribe rushed to defend the village. Bridges were pulled up, weapons handed out, traps activated. Jack stood beside Leary, helping where he could. He showed them how to build flame jars, small bottles filled with sap and sparkstone. He tied nets, sharpened stakes, and placed alarms across the outer platforms. He was no longer a visitor. He was preparing for war as night fell. The jungle seemed to breathe. Fog rolled in, thick and cold, covering everything in shadows. Then came the sound: slow, scraping, dragging claws. Red eyes blinked in the mist. Dozens of them. The attack began. One creature leaped from the trees, its body twisting in midair. A guard shot an arrow, hitting its shoulder, but it didn't stop. Jack threw a fire jar, and the beast lit up in flames. Screaming as it crashed down, another came from below. Climbing the roots like a spider, Leary shouted, and 3 warriors pulled it down with glowing ropes. Stabbing it with energy spears, the air filled with smoke, fire, and the sounds of battle. Screams echoed across the treetops, and the glowing light of the village began to flicker. In the center, Jack fought with everything he had. He blocked claws with shields, shoved creatures off platforms, and covered wounded warriors. But there were too many. They were stronger this time, more organized, smarter. Then Jack heard Leary scream. He turned and saw her being pulled toward the edge by one of the largest creatures. Its skin covered in black armor, eyes glowing like fire. He ran, leaping across the platform, and tackled the beast. It slammed him to the ground, claws cutting deep into his side. But Jack didn't stop. He grabbed a spear and drove it into the beast's chest again and again until it fell. Leary dropped to her knees beside him, her hands glowing. She whispered words he didn't understand, and the pain in his side faded. Her hands were healing him somehow. But even as she saved him, more creatures climbed the trees, surrounding the village. Then Leary stood, her whole body glowing with bright blue light. She stepped to the edge of the platform and raised her hands. A wave of energy exploded from her. Pushing the Zarowin back, the creatures screamed, their bodies turning to dust in the light. Silence followed, broken only by the crackling of small fires. The village had survived, but barely. The ground was littered with wounded, broken wood, and ash. Vera walked to Jack and Leary, her face pale. "You were right," she said, looking at Jack. "They are back." Leary looked up at the stars, her eyes full of sadness. "They won't stop," she whispered. "They will return, stronger, with more." Jack stood beside her, his body aching but his heart burning. "Then we'll be ready," he said, and above them, high in the sky, a dark ship moved behind the clouds, watching, waiting, planning its next move. The jungle didn't sleep that night. The fires burned low, smoke rising into the strange sky. The tribe moved silently, tending to the wounded, rebuilding broken bridges and watching the trees for signs of movement. But the creatures were gone for now. They had tested the tribe's strength, and now they would return with full force. Jack sat near the edge of the platform, wrapping a cloth around his side. His body hurt, but he was alive. Leary sat beside him, her glow dim, her face tired. She had used too much energy during the battle, and now she was weak. Still, she looked at Jack and gave a soft smile. "You fight like one of us," she whispered. Jack smiled back. "You shine like the sun." They didn't need many words now. They understood each other. Vera approached them. Her armor darkened with blood and dust. "We will not survive another attack like that," she said. Her voice low. "They are watching, waiting, and they will strike again." Jack stood, gripping his spear. "Then we strike first." Vera raised an eyebrow. Surprised. "You want to go to them?" "No," Jack said. "I want to end it, before they end all of us, the next day." The tribe gathered in the central circle. Warriors, elders, and young girls stood together as Vera spoke. "For years we have hidden, survived, lost friends and family," she said. "But the Zeroin are no longer hunting. They are preparing to wipe us out." She looked at Jack, and now, "We have someone who brings us fire." Jack stepped forward and unrolled a map he had drawn with Leary. It showed the jungle, their village, and a deep canyon far to the north. "That is where they come from," Leary said. Her voice stronger now. "It was once a mine. Now it is their nest." Jack pointed at the map. "We take the fight to them with everything we have." The tribe prepared. Flame jars were filled and sealed. Weapons sharpened, traps packed into bags. Leary stood at the center, her skin glowing brighter each hour. She was changing, stronger, faster, more focused. Jack noticed how even Vera now looked at her with respect. Not just as a sister, but maybe something more. Before leaving, the tribe held a quiet ceremony. They placed glowing stones on their armor, painted their faces with silver marks. And then they marched through jungle and swamp, across rivers and ancient ruins. They moved like shadows, silent and focused. Jack led from the front, Leary beside him, her light guiding their path. Finally, after 2 days, they reached the canyon. It was deep, carved into the earth like a scar. Smoke rose from its mouth, and strange machines hummed below. Zarawan moved across platforms and towers, dark shapes with glowing weapons. There were dozens, maybe hundreds. "This is suicide," one warrior whispered. "No," Jack said. "This is war." They waited for night. Then the tribe spread out, setting traps, placing flame jars, preparing ambush points. Leary and Jack moved through the shadows, disabling lights and marking targets. At midnight, Vera gave the signal 3 sharp clicks. Then the jungle exploded. Fire lit the sky, and smoke poured from the canyon. Flame jars hit machines, setting them ablaze. Traps snapped shut on enemy legs, and arrows flew through the dark. The Zeruan roared in anger and confusion, charging into the trees. But the tribe was ready. They moved fast, striking and vanishing like ghosts. Jack fought at the front, blocking attacks, throwing flame jars, and cutting down creatures with fire-tipped spears. Leary moved like lightning, her body glowing, her eyes filled with fury. She used her energy to blind, to burn, to protect. Then came the giant enormous Zeruan, twice the size of the others, covered in black armor and surrounded by guards. It stepped onto the battlefield and roared. Shaking the earth, the tribe froze, unsure. Jack stepped forward, but Leary held his arm. "This one is mine," she said. She walked into the light, her body glowing like a star. The giant swung its massive claw, but she dodged it easily with a burst of light. She flew into the air and sent a beam of energy into its chest. It screamed, but didn't fall. She struck again, this time with all her power. A shockwave spread across the canyon. knocking back enemies, tearing through metal, and the giant fell. The battle raged for hours, but by dawn, the enemy was broken. Smoke rose from the nest, and silence followed. The war was over. For now, the tribe stood together in the light of sunrise. Tired but alive, they had won. They had fought back. And they had shown that even in the darkest places, there is still fire and hope. Leary stood beside Jack. Her body dim now, her power drained. "You did it," she whispered. Jack shook his head. "We did it, but far above them." In the sky where stars still shined, something else moved. A signal had been sent, and more were coming. The battlefield was quiet. Smoke still rose from the deep canyon. But the fire had died. The tribe stood among the ruins. Silent, tired, and full of emotion, they had won the fight. But not without loss. Some warriors were gone. Some wounded, and all changed. Jack sat on a broken stone, looking out over the jungle. His clothes were torn, his body bruised, but his eyes were calm. He had survived something he never expected. He had come to this planet as a broken man, a stranded pilot. Now he was something more. A fighter, a leader, a protector. Leary walked toward him, her glow dim but still beautiful. She knelt beside him and placed her hand on his shoulder. "You should rest," she said. Jack shook his head. "Later," he replied. He looked at the sky, where the stars were still fading into morning light. "I think they're watching," he said. "Whoever sent the Zeroin," Leary nodded. "They felt it. They will come, but next time, we won't run." Later that day, the tribe held a quiet ceremony in the heart of the jungle. Glowing flowers were placed in a circle, and each warrior stood with pride. Vera stepped forward and raised her hand for silence. She looked at Jack, then at the tribe. "Today, we stand not just as survivors, but as warriors," she said. "We fought the dark, and we held the light." She turned to Jack and placed a glowing stone in his hand. "This is the mark of the Guardian," she said. "You are now one of us." Jack looked at the stone, then at the faces around him, aliens, warriors, sisters, friends. They weren't human, but they were his people now. He didn't need Earth anymore. He had found his place. Leary stepped forward, holding a staff carved with symbols of her tribe. She spoke loudly for all to hear. "We are not the last," she said. "There are others, hiding, afraid. But now, we rise, we send a message not just to the enemy, but to the stars. We are still here." That night, they lit a great fire in the center of the jungle. The flames rose high, glowing with blue and gold light. The signal reached the clouds and beyond. It was a warning and a promise. The tribe of light was no longer in hiding. Later, Jack sat with Leary near the edge of the village, looking at the stars. He had questions. "Do you think more will come?" he asked. "Yes," she said. "But we'll be ready." Jack looked at her, really looked. She was no longer just the scared girl he had rescued in the rain. She was a leader now, strong, brave, and full of purpose. "What will you do now?" he asked. She smiled. "Rebuild, train others. Find lost tribes and teach them to fight. Teach them to believe in themselves." Jack nodded, then held up the glowing stone she had given him. "I guess I'll help," he said with a small smile. Leary laughed softly. "You already are." The stars twinkled above them. And for the first time in years, Jack felt peace. He had found something he didn't know he was looking for. A reason to fight. A reason to stay. A new home. Days passed, and the village began to change. New defenses were built, scouts were sent out. Messages were carved into trees, written in the old language and in simple symbols for others to read. "Come home," the signs said. The fire still burns, and deep in the jungle, far beyond the mountains. Someone saw the signs. Another survivor. Another tribe, another spark. The light was spreading. Jack stood at the edge of the village, watching young warriors train with wooden spears. He helped guide their hands, corrected their stance, and smiled when they got it right. Vera stood nearby, arms crossed, pretending not to smile. "You've changed us," she said quietly. Jack shook his head. "You changed yourselves." Then Leary walked up. Holding a small box carved from glowing stone, she opened it, revealing a small device part of Jack's old ship. "Now repaired. A beacon," she said, "to contact Earth." Jack looked at it. Then looked at the sky. He held it for a long time. Thinking then, without a word, he closed the box and handed it back to her. "Not yet," he said. Leary's smile widened. "You are one of us now," as the sun rose, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. Jack stood beside the tribe, his tribe, and far above. Beyond the clouds, ships moved in silence. Watching, waiting, but now, Earth was not alone. And humanity was not finished, because somewhere in the stars, a promise had been made, and Jack was ready to keep it.